Woke writers panic as jobs get canceled and writers' rooms shrink into oblivion. Here's what they're also upset about. There's a lot fewer job opportunities. With the rise of streaming platforms, traditional writers' rooms with multiple writers have been replaced by smaller mini rooms with fewer episodes, leading to fewer jobs available for writers. Their jobs don't last as long as they used to. Writers are concerned about the shorter duration of employment due to reduced episode counts, which forces them to constantly search for new work to maintain a living wage. And with the collapse of Hollywood production, good luck finding that work. Many writers are reporting that despite the recent strike achieving higher pay, the overall reduction in content production and available jobs has left them struggling to secure steady employment. Writers are also freaking out about the increased use of AI in the industry. While there are protections in place, they worry about how AI could impact their future job security and the writing process. Writers who benefited from virtual writers' rooms during the pandemic are panicked as studios push for a return to in-person work, which may disrupt their personal lives or force them to relocate. Although diversity initiatives still exist, writers of color worry about limited spots and feel that they're competing for a token position in writers' rooms with other workers of color. Hey, you've really got to get your job based on merit, and if you don't get your job based on merit, it's not going to be a career. And the massive contraction of content production, TV shows and movies not getting produced, and the shutdown of studios like Paramount TV's division, further reduce job opportunities and create fear about long-term career sustainability in Hollywood. Whether it's Hollywood, Main Street, or Wall Street, if you're not good at what you do, go do something else that you're good at doing. Because in Hollywood in particular, they're in a depression. They're not out hiring people that can't do good work. If you can write hit content, non-woke content, then you've got a chance at getting a job. Coming from The Guardian, it's a very tough time in Hollywood, inside the shrinking world of the TV writer's room. Between the impact of last year's strikes, a reduction in scripted content, and a racial reckoning, the life of a screenwriter has shifted. When a powerful earthquake struck near Los Angeles last month, it was a neat metaphor for a Hollywood film industry shaken in recent years by a streaming revolution. COVID pandemic, racial reckoning, and crippling strikes. And nowhere are the aftershocks felt more keenly than in the writer's room. These are collaborative spaces where writers come together to brainstorm ideas, debate plot twists, bounce jokes off of each other, and punch up scripts so they're ready for production. The formula has produced TV greats from The Dick Van Dyke Show to Saturday Night Live, from The Simpsons to The Sopranos. In the era when networks would commission a season of 22 episodes of a sitcom or drama, these rooms would often boast a dozen or more writers who would also assist on set if the actors needed guidance during filming, an exposure that many say was invaluable. What a great way to learn the industry and to learn your skills. When I first operated my comic book company, we had a studio of artists, and we had a great manager of the studio. The strongest artists were able to help the less strong artists, and the manager was able to help people directly, get people to collaborate, learn from each other. That's what you get in a writer's room collaborative environment. But the studios don't need that kind of production process anymore. And they can't afford to subsidize it. The rooms were precious training grounds for young writers to cut their teeth and build a network of contacts. But that was then. Today, with the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix, studios increasingly rely on so-called mini rooms with just 4 or 5 writers to create shows, often with fewer episodes. And you can imagine if you're a diversity hire and they're hiring you because they want to have color in the room or whatever the excuse is or the reason is, if you're really not there based on merit and you can't actually contribute anything that they can actually use, it's got to be a really uncomfortable situation for everyone. Anyone who is hired based on merit can contribute to the team, can learn from the team, and also maybe come up with some new great ideas for the team. In most cases, the writers' rooms today are very different from 10 or 20 years ago, says Matt Belloni, an entertainment lawyer and former editor of The Hollywood Reporter, who also runs Puck.News right now. Most shows have far fewer episodes. The days of 22-episode network sitcoms and dramas are mostly gone. and consequently the number of writers in a writer's room is typically much fewer than it was. Now there are more shows than there were back then, but the number of shows is coming down from the peak of 3 or 4 years ago. These factors and the rise of artificial intelligence were bones of contention during last year's writer's strike, which lasted 148 days and was one of the longest in Hollywood history, compounded by actors going on strike at the same time. The Writers Guild of America fought to preserve the writer's room as an inherently valuable concept. But here's what the studio's attitude was. Quote, if writing needs to be done, writers are hired, but these proposals require the employment of writers whether they're needed for the creative process or not. Showrunners who are also on-site producers, sometimes the creators of their shows, also do writing. So to get to the point where you've got to hire people to staff them in a room, you can do that, but the point the studio has is like, look, sure, we'll subsidize a couple of people, but really, we may not even need them for the scripts. Why are we hiring them? The studios proposed that writers' rooms should have a minimum of just 3 writers, including the showrunner. The union managed to fend this off and reach an agreement that shows intended to run at least 13 episodes will have at least 6 writers on staff, with numbers shifting based on the number of episodes. Staff on shows in initial development will be employed for at least 10 weeks, while staff on shows that will go on air will be employed for at least 3 weeks per episode. 3 weeks here, 10 weeks there doesn't sound so stable. Anton Chatini, who has worked in 14 TV's writers' rooms and is the author of Breaking Into TV Writing, says, quote, because streamers have shorter seasons, writers' rooms last a shorter amount of time. There are fewer episodes, something like 6 to 10 on streamers, whereas networks would do 22, or in the days of cable, there would be like 12 episodes. Your time working in a writer's room has certainly shortened. And we have seen up until the strike, the writer's room getting smaller and smaller, which is why the WGA fought for a minimum in the negotiation, which was implemented. Without a minimum, they would have been down to like 2 writers. The issue is, though, if you don't need the writers, why are you hiring these people? The 3-year contract also secured an increase in pay and future residual earnings of between 3.5% and 5%. That was a boost for those who can't get work. But for many writers who endured the strike, in the hope that good times were just around the corner, conditions remain brutal. The May article headlined "The Daily Terror of Being a TV Writer Right Now," Gideon Yago, whose credits include The Newsroom and The Mosquito Coast, told Vanity Fair, quote, I just don't sleep. These last couple of months have been the hardest. I haven't had a single conversation with anyone in the industry that hasn't expressed fear and frustration. That's really, really bad when you're in the enchantment and entertainment business. A screenwriter who has worked on several high-profile shows and wishes to remain anonymous tells The Guardian that some of his former co-workers are no longer getting hired. Quote, these are people who are not breaking in. They worked on the same shows that I did right before, he says in a phone interview. Now they're saying, we're not getting any work. Our agents and managers are saying staffing is tricky out there. Partly it's because the strike brought us a lot of benefits. Salaries have increased. Mini rooms are much better paid than before. And as a result of that, there are fewer of them. Because if you push an industry to do something they can't afford, what do you think they're going to do? They're just going to do less of it. So you're getting paid X and you want to get X times 2. Okay, here's X times 2. Now I'm going to hit it with a 1/2 multiplier. So now you're back down to X. And what's worse is before the strike, there were more writing jobs available. Now, since the strike, they're getting a little bit more money, but there's less jobs available. So it's shared between less people and everyone's making less, generally speaking, on a person-by-person basis. That's not good if you're a writer. And Hollywood now can be a lot more picky about who they hire and who they don't hire. Which is why if you're weak on merit, you've got a big problem. Despite the reduced episode count, writers argue that the workload remains just as hard, and with the shorter employment periods, they must constantly be on the lookout for the next opportunity to earn a living wage in Los Angeles. The current climate is forcing them to make difficult decisions. The writer adds, quote, there are people I know that have been in the industry for a long time, and they used to say, I only work on the East Coast. I'm not going to travel to LA, or I prefer Zoom because I'm a full-time single parent. But now they're saying, I need the money, so if I have to pack up my kids and family full-time for 20 weeks with potential hiatuses built in, I guess that's what I have to do. Virtual writers' rooms sprang up during the pandemic, although studios are now pushing for a full return in person. The screenwriter adds, remote work is dwindling a bit. It became very popular during the pandemic. People were used to rooms fully virtual, but now things are starting to go back to normal. The writer's strike began 5 months after OpenAI released its AI tool ChatGPT. The new agreement stipulates that scripts must be written by humans, not AI. And if you take a moment to think about this, when their agreement says scripts need to be written by humans, not AI, what does that tell you? It tells you that scripts could be written by AI, or certainly in the future could be written by AI. And that's their current agreement. Who knows what happens in the future? But it doesn't sound good for Hollywood writers. The agreement also states that studio and production companies are obligated to disclose to writers if any material given to them has been generated by AI in full or partly. And if you can't tell the difference, if you're a professional writer, whether or not what the studio gives you to work with has been written by AI, that tells you it's probably pretty good work. In addition, AI-generated storylines will not be regarded as literary material, a term in their contracts for scripts and other story forms a screenwriter produces, so writers will not have to compete with AI for screen credits. The companies are not barred from using AI to generate content, but writers have the right to sue if their work is used to train AI. So if you're a writer working for Hollywood and you see scripts that give you a feel like maybe I could have written this because they trained the AI based on multiple copies of your scripts, then at least you have the right to sue. For now, studios seem content to let writers do the work rather than spending money on AI. The anonymous screenwriter comments, quote, last year AI was the conversation of the moment. Could we come up with a bit of content or an outline or treatment without hiring writers? But once a room is fully up and running and you have access to all these creatives, no one is going to look outside for additional AI content. Most people are like, well, we pay you guys, so come up with this on your own. The writer gave the example of fake newspapers or fake crawls that run across the screen on a cable news channel or a TV in the background of a scene. Quote, that's something you'd think people would pay to use AI to generate, but we write it manually. In the morning, you're like, let's write the crawls that are coming to this fake CNN report that's on the TV in the background. In that sense, that's been encouraging. All writers respect the process enough that it's not part of the conversation. It's not something you default to. Another upheaval for writers' rooms over the past 5 years have been the racial reckoning following the death of George Floyd. More studios have diverse writer programs, and some actively mandate that each writer's room has a diverse element. The unnamed screenwriter, who is Black, comments, quote, it adds a safety to my career in that there's an element of, if we have an all-male or all-white writer's room, showrunners will feel the need to add some diversity. It's crass to say they'll pick from a pile, but they will seek to rectify that. I do think, though, that role is limited. Some former colleagues say it's easier if you're a person of color to get hired right now. I always bristle against that because there's only one in my room and it's me. I know other writers of color who are in rooms of 2 writers of color, so it feels like a checkbox that once it's checked, people don't look beyond that to fulfill that need. To me, it feels like I'm not taking a spot that would go to other people. I'm competing with a lot of people who look like me to fill the only spot, and once that spot is filled, diversity has been met. Writers suffered financially even when streaming was booming as studios tried to compete with Netflix and, adopting a Silicon Valley mindset, prioritize subscriber growth and hope profits would follow. And that's what Wall Street was rewarding. Wall Street, if you posted that you got more subscribers, would get excited about your stock. They did that for Netflix, and they did do that for the studios for a while, until that mindset on Wall Street was no longer popular. The result was content saturation. That Wall Street mentality of just get more and more subscribers, we don't care if you're profitable, caused some expensive shows barely to be watched or even left on the shelf. Studios have been grasping for a sustainable business model, and writers now face even a greater hardship as studios scale down, lay people off, and consolidate. Earlier this month, Paramount shut down its television studio as part of a cost-cutting measure to save $500 million. Paramount Global announced on a Tuesday to their executives and their employees, hey, we're shutting down Paramount TV this Friday, like 3-4 days out, shutting it down, not going to be in business anymore. Even in a bankruptcy, you don't do it in 3 or 4 days. That's unheard of. Maloney, the entertainment lawyer who also runs Puck.News, had this to say. When Netflix became the dominant streaming service, all the legacy media companies bolted out to try to compete. Now they're pulling back because they spent so much money and their investors are asking for profit, not subscriber growth. It's a very tough time in Hollywood. The pullback in content and the bursting of the TV bubble has led to fewer jobs, more competition, and tougher negotiating positions for these writers. All of it means it's tougher than ever to be a working professional screenwriter. And what are the smart writers and creators in Hollywood doing? They're doing this from the Los Angeles Times. Get to know your enemy. How Hollywood workers are learning to use AI. Hollywood is getting a crash course on merit. If you're not someone that can point to your work and say, look how good this is, you're not going to get the work. There may be one job on a team where they say, oh, we need to check a box, we have to hire a diversity person, so they'll do that. But that person won't really be able to contribute if they're not hired based on merit. And the writer room jobs don't last forever. They seem to last for just a few weeks, maybe 10 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. Even when you get a job, you have to go and try and find another job. What are you going to do next? Ultimately, if you're not really good at what you do, you're not going to make it in Hollywood. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.